Chronicling COVID. For this week's episode of the 802 News podcast, a Burlington-based historian tells host Mark Johnson about an oral history project featuring interviews from hundreds of Vermonters about life during the pandemic. Let's take a listen.
I think what for me did stand out as one of the few shared experiences that was reflected in a lot of the interviews that were conducted for this project for the Vermont Historical Society was a pride in being a Vermonter during the pandemic and pride in how the state handled the pandemic and a sense of almost relief that they were in Vermont during the pandemic.
And Mark joins us now. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
So why is this oral history aspect of the project so important to historian Garrett Graff? The snippet we just heard, he kind of talks about some of the common themes he heard throughout interviews. Did he have some specific things he thought were like the most important that stood out? Any trends?
Well, he's done a couple of these oral history projects. He did one on 9/11. He did one on D-Day. And what he said was different about this one is that unlike those two events, which were kind of an event and everybody looking inward on it, COVID was more like this, that it went on for so long and there were these different periods. And, the real goal of this is to get people as soon as you can on the record because, of course, our memories fade over time. And really, he was doing this project for now, but also really for 50 and 100 years from now. There are about 3,000 pages of interviews that are sitting down at the Vermont Historical Society, which was the group that really put this on. So, he said a historian 50 or 100 years from now could come in, look at this same set of interviews and come up with a completely different book than he did.
So were these interviews that were done while the pandemic was in the kind of the throes of it, or were these done afterwards?
Well, I was one of the 4 people that did them. So they were done a couple of years in, looking back at 2020 and 2021. So we did a lot of them in 2022, 2023, and then Garrett is just one of these people who I don't know how I did these interviews and I thought, I don't know how somebody is going to be able to make a thread out of this, but he was able to do it and do it pretty darn quickly.
Mm-hmm. We're now 5 years out from the start of the pandemic. Hindsight is 2020, no pun intended. But what would you say is the most important lesson to be learned about how it went down here in Vermont, but also elsewhere?
Well, we were lucky here in Vermont. We had sort of a natural social distancing because we have such a small population. I think people acknowledge now that we should have been pushing masks sooner. The impact on kids. Maybe in hindsight, kids could have gone back to school sooner. But at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. Lessons learned, hopefully not for next time, but you make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time.
And is there a way people can hear these interviews, the audio itself, or is it only the written pages that are at the Historical Society?
Well, no, we submitted audio too. I believe, but I think you have to go down there to actually hear that. But it's all going to be reservoir down there, including a lot of, other kind of paraphernalia, I guess I would describe it as. But the written pages and the audio, my understanding is, are down in Barrie.
And of course, if you want a shortened version of that, you can always listen to the 802 News podcast, which is on our website, WCAX.com. Mark Johnson, as always, thanks for being here.
Thank you.